Things are really starting to come together now. I've got a finished frame back here. I've got a fuel tank that's been refinished, and I've got a rear axle that's almost refinished. So I've got all these projects within a project right now. Things are kind of scattered around my garage. I spent quite a bit of time today trying to pick up, clean up, and organize, reevaluate what I want to do. And I think I want to start getting this stuff back on the truck. I'm going to start with the fuel tank. The fuel tank can't go in yet though because the brake lines need to be redone up over this new cross member. The old ones don't quite fit the same. There's nothing wrong with the brake lines. I followed them all the way up to the master cylinder and there's no kinks, rust, bubbles, no nothing. It's in great shape. These are poly-coated lines with an additional thick plastic layer on it. It's probably why they last so long. My plan is to cut them about down in here and put a proper union in, and then I'll bend them up nice and neat back to this proportioning valve. I did clean up and powder coat these with my new gray powder coat. I like the color and the contrast. Not that anybody's really going to see it, but I just got to get those lines routed up to here so I can get the tank in next. And then I'm going to start working on these leaf springs because I have to get those hung back on the frame so I can get that axle in. That's going to start getting all these parts back on the truck where they belong. I cut off those lines. I think they're in a good spot right now. I staggered them to give them a little bit more room to work, and so not the unions aren't touching each other because there's a little more clearance there. After I got those off, I did deburr the ends as you want to do when you flare a new end. Then I also had to take a razor blade and carefully cut back this hard protective coating. I took about 2 inches off here. That gives me room to work. Now, everybody's favorite tool, the old brake line flaring tool. I like to make a practice before I ever work on the vehicle, just to get back in the groove. It turned out just fine, so I feel pretty comfortable with it now, so I can not screw these up. And also, to not screw it up, whenever I get this tool out, I always say, tube nut, tube nut, tube nut. And I try not to forget it, because you always make your best flares when you forget to put these things on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, so I don't make that mistake. There's 1 and 2. I've also got these caps on here just to kind of slow the rate of brake fluid loss. Try not to make a giant mess on my floor. The reservoir is full, the brake reservoir, so I'm not worried about running it dry. Now I gotta just get this set up on here and then make the flares, and then the rest of the stuff can be done on the bench when I run the lines up the frame. This is the brake line I'm going with. It's NiCop. It's a copper alloy. It's supposed to be really easy to bend. It doesn't rust. Everybody I know that's used it says it's just awesome. It's a real joy to work with. I've never used it before, so I'm looking forward to it. I've only done steel lines, coated, uncoated, and also a fair bit of stainless steel as well. I've got tube nuts and various tools. This is my turret style vice-mounted flaring tool. This thing's actually really awesome. There's a lot of different brands out there. They're all pretty much the same. This one I happen to get from Eastwood. There's 45-degree standard stuff, and I opted for the 37-degree die set as well so that I could do AN lines, and it's done a great job there. This kit I bought to try out. It was a very enticing buy on Amazon. They say it is the ultimate cable clamp assortment set, so we'll see. They do look pretty nice. It's got all kinds of stuff in there. I figured I could use some of the brake line ones if needed, but there's also bigger ones I can use for fuel lines and other stuff if I need to tie them back in the future. We'll give those a shot. One thing that I really wanted to find for this truck are these Dorman part number 800-285. These are a dual 3/16 brake line clip that all you need is a hole in your frame. You can drill one hole, snap this in, and you can nice and tightly run the line. So I looked through a lot of catalogs. I think this is probably the closest one to what I was looking for. and try it out and get to running these lines. Looks like I'm going to need around 40 inches of line to get me to where I need to be. In the past, running brake lines around tricky areas, it's nice to grab a piece of like TIG fill rod, and then you can bend it the shape that you're trying to make off the vehicle, and then you could transfer it like to a bench where you could more easily bend it and then bring it back to the vehicle. It just takes a little bit of that frustration out of the process. You can also use, any kind of wire you got laying around, or even if you had a piece of, bare copper, solid core or something like that. Just something to give you a reference. I don't think I'm going to be needing it with this stuff because everybody says it's so easy to bend. I pulled it out of the roll and it's already, I can tell this stuff is quite flexible. So, oh man, jeez. Yeah, no kidding, look at that. It hasn't kinked or anything, I'm being careful with it, but I think I'm gonna lay this out on a straight edge and try to get it at least straight first, a section, and then I'll trim it down, flare an end, and then I'll bend it where it needs to go. But this stuff is super easy to work with. Pretty impressed so far. These lines are all finished up. They turned out great. I'm super happy with it. You can see why I had kind of staggered or offset these unions. Gives a little more room to work. They're not stacked right on top of each other. But this stuff was amazing to work with. It is really nice. So it's spaced nicely from the frame. I don't see any reason that it's going to be a problem. The fittings are all made up and cleaned up. And I'm ready to put the fuel tank in. So before I go doing that, I just want to show the fuel tank strap that I modified in a previous video. I went ahead and powder coated it with that new dark gray color I have. It looks really nice. This will protect it from rust. And I also went ahead and pulled off the old fuel tank rubber insulator from the original strap. And then I used rubber contact cement and I went ahead and bonded it. So it is ready to go. This thing should be really easy to put back into place now because there's not a single drop of fuel in there. It's completely dry, empty, and ready to go. I want to get this rear axle back under the truck. First, I'm going to get these leaf packs hung on the frame. I've decided I'm going to go ahead and replace the bushings now since they're apart. The leaves themselves are in good shape. They're not that old. I did power wash them and clean them up. I'm not going to go through and refinish them like I did everything else. I think they're fine the way they are. Now, these are an older ARB Dakar leaf pack. They've been replaced by a newer part number now. they're similar but not the same. So when I ordered this kit from Wheeler's Off-Road, I made sure that I got bushings that fit the front main eye right here. These are 4 of these CSO 46 leaves. Those will pop right in. I really want to make sure I got a greasable rear shackle set. So I got these ARB OME GS12. This is a zero lift stock length shackle kit. They're greasable. So they're basically like rifle drilled straight down. They got a grease zerk and they're cross drilled there so you can grease all your bushings. Make it easier to maintain, keep them free of movement, hopefully not squeak. So I'm really happy about that. Probably should have got these from the get-go when I did this whole thing years ago. Here they are, quite a bit more beefy than these factory style ones. And one thing that I know is gonna be a problem when I order this kit, these are supposed to fit factory Toyota leaf backs. And these are not factory anymore. How big of a difference? I don't know what it was gonna be, because all these spring companies just kind of make their own bushings and they say you must buy this bushing for this leaf pack, blah, blah, blah. So they don't really tell you what the differences are, the dimensions on any of the bushings. So I figured I'd take a shot first and see if I can modify the bushings to fit. Now this side will fit fine because it's factory. It's a factory in the frame mount. These are going to slide right in to the rear shackle spring mount here on the frame. I've already got the old ones out and I've got the bores cleaned out. The only bushing I'm going to have trouble with is this shackle eye back here. I can tell from looking at it, it's a little bit too big. Not by a whole lot, but I think I can make this work so I don't have to buy a whole nother kit to change these out, specifically for this older pack. I'm going to work on that next. Starting with the rear shackle side, I supported this leaf pack on a couple blocks of wood just to shim it off the floor. I found an old piece of pipe I had laying around. It's going to fit as a receiver under this inner bushing that I need to drive out, that steel bushing that's in there. I machined this down real quick. It's just a cut off blank of something. So I machined that in my lathe just to make a remover tool. So it shouldn't take too much effort. I'm going to drive this inner sleeve out of the leaf eye. Oh yeah, it goes. Just like that. There it is. So that's out of there. Give the old college try. It's out. The old bushings are out of the leaves. Now I'm ready to get the new ones installed. I went ahead and measured all the dimensions. You could probably call a tech department, but most of the stuff's not available on the websites. They just say you need this bushing kit number with this or that. So I went ahead and just measured them all. This is the GS12. This is specific to the CSO 46 leaves, the main eye. Now this is the shackle side. This is the bushing that I'm having a problem with, okay? So here is the greasable kit assembled. Here's the frame side. Most people aren't going to have a problem with that. I'm assuming they're going to have this, a factory mount. But I'm trying to just trim these bushings down so they'll fit within the shackle eye of this leaf pack. This is the sleeve I drove out. This is the bushing that needs to go in. So you can see how much bigger that is. I measured it. It's roughly 35.5 millimeters in the leaf, or 4.6 millimeters too big, 181 thousandths. So I'm going to try and come up with a way that I can cut this down a bit, and then that'll pop right in, and then all this kit can be assembled. The lathe saves the day again. I love that machine. I took one pair of bushings, chucked up one of these bolts from the kit, and I got a couple of large washers that I could compress it just enough to grab it without squishing it, and distorting the bushing so that it would hold. I took several light cuts with a sharp tool steel cutter, and I was able to reduce it down to the proper diameter that I needed. So this is the original bushing unmodified in their kit, and here's what it looks like turned down. So you can see now I got it the diameter I needed to. Here's the original sleeve. So I test fitted these. They fit in perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and machine the other two, and I'll be ready to assemble. All the leaf bushings got installed. The leaves got mounted to the truck frame. The rear axle's now hanging down there. All the bolts are torqued to spec. The shocks are in. Now I got a whole bunch of little stuff that I got to do back here, like the wiring harness, the parking brake cables. I've got the proportioning valve rod. I got to work on that, and some various clips, the vent hose for the diff. The big thing that's holding me up right now is getting that third member cleaned up and reinstalled. I'm going to be doing that after all this little stuff's done, and then it's going to be nearly drivable. Here's a progress update on the truck. I got the wiring harness installed. I've got the new rubber hose for the differential vent routed all the way up by the filler neck, so that's done. The new factory parking brake cable's installed. I was a little concerned how it was going to mount to this aftermarket Dorman diff cover. It seems to be okay right now. The lower one's almost in the same spot, so it's fine, but the upper one's pushed out a little bit. I think it's going to be cool. I'm going to leave it alone until it's set at ride height. If I need to make a change to it, I'll worry about it then. I've got the axles slid in right now so that I could route the new brake lines to the wheel cylinders, even though the third member's not in yet. You can see the right side's done. I've got it attached with these stainless steel P-clamps I got in the Amazon kit down there. They're actually pretty nice. I just had to upsize the hole with a step bit so these M8 bolts would fit. I'm real happy with them. They should last forever. The left side's done. It's just off the truck right now. Here's the wire I used to make a template. And you can see the finished result here. It turned out real nice. I like to do that. I think it saves time. It's easier. It takes the frustration out because you can take it off the vehicle. I've got a whole bunch of just cheap basic wire like that for making the templates before I transfer it to the brake line. This is that NICOP. It's my first time using it. I like it. It bends very easy. I don't even think you really need the bending tools for it. But as far as flaring it goes, I found I got better results with the basic flaring tool. I think it's just the technique of how it slowly threads it in and it kind of forms the end versus my vice-mounted turret-style fancy one. It kind of pushes a die into the end of the tube, and I was getting some inconsistent results. I don't know if you can see these or not, but they're kind of wrinkled on the backside. It kind of like folds over on itself, and it was giving me inconsistent results on the flare. So I would recommend probably just using the more basic tool if you're going to work with this stuff for the first time. I got a new brake hose. This one is the old rusty factory Tacoma one. And the one next to it here, this is a new one from a Tundra of the same era. I was doing some looking around online, trying to find a cheap alternative for a longer brake line. Turns out the Tundra one, being so similar, to the Tacoma, just happens to have the same fittings, but it's longer by 4 or 5 inches. So that'll go well with my lift on my truck. I could have gone with a braided stainless steel fancy one for 60, 80 bucks, but this was maybe 15 or less. It's a Raybestos part. I think I got it on Amazon. There's the part number right there if anybody's curious. It's going to work out just fine. It threads into the Y block and mounts perfectly up here in the brake line hose clamp up top. I still have to get the vent for the diff actuator. It was drilled into a hole in the frame, so I'm going to do the same thing. Drill through my box frame with the appropriate size hole. That'll snap that in, get that done. And then I've got the proportioning valve rod. I got to get that installed. I was going to make a whole new rod that's just longer because of the lift. Try to do something a little different. It was getting to be a little bit too complicated, so I'm going to go the simple route. I'm just going to make one of the extension brackets like everybody else does, and then just move that up so that it's happy. Those parts are getting painted right now, and then I can start reassembling that. But it's getting very, very close to being finished up back here, and I can drop it back down. Another progress update back here. I went ahead and threw the old crusty bumper on because I need something to get me down the road for now until I figure out what I'm going to do there. All the brake lines are fully installed. I even gravity bled the system and capped it off until I get it completely done. You can see the new Tundra brake hose looking sexy right there. It's perfect. It's going to give me all that extra length I need with this lift. Now, the proportioning valve rod is on. You can see I cleaned it up, painted it black. It's got the new factory Toyota boot and bushing kit on there. All went in real nice. A little tricky to assemble, but it's all rebuilt like brand new. Down below, where it mounts to the rear axle, I still need to make an extension bracket to get that sitting proper, but I'm going to wait until this thing's down at ride height before I mess with that. One other thing I did was to get this vent for the diff lock actuator installed. You can see it here, this black plastic tube where it goes into this rubber thing into that connector. I drilled a small hole in the frame accordingly and got that sealed in place. You follow it down here, you'll see the other end where it comes out of the harness. That plugs into the diff lock actuator, and there's the other connectors for that. My next real big thing back here is to get that third member looked at so I can get that installed, and then I can finally button it up and get it back on the ground. I got the third member cleaned up. It's ready to go back in. The gasket sealing surface is all prepped and ready. The rear axle housing earlier, I had already cleaned this mating surface, cleaned all the studs. They've been Loctite and sealed in place. I thought I would mention that inside this rear axle housing are these oil deflector shields. They kind of slip in here, and then they slide over and lock into place. There, you can hear them click into place. There's a tab on the top and the bottom that are kind of spot welded that holds those there. Here's the other side that I still got to put in. And then, of course, I've been doing a lot of work putting the axles in and out of this. So when I redid the wheel bearings, I didn't install the new inner lip seals yet, or the O-ring. So those are going to go in on this final fitment. The axles have been pulled out right now so that I can put the third member in. Final thing I wanted to mention is that this rear cover, if you're going to replace yours, I would highly recommend you strip the axle down, because I've seen some people that have tried to drain the fluid and cut it off and weld it on while it's on the vehicle and the third member's still in. I think it's a really bad idea. There was so much debris inside of here, metal and abrasive material, when I cut this off. And I did a decent job of kind of masking it off and taping it up, when I was grinding it. Try to minimize how much stuff got in here. But even so, there was just so much stuff. And just imagine how much stuff is trapped inside and behind of these shields. So what I did was just, dismantle this thing, cut it out, welded it in place, and I did a really thorough job of cleaning this thing out. I wiped it down with mineral spirits, and I power washed it like crazy, and I made sure this thing was just as clean as can be. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that in case anybody's trying to cut some corners and just weld one on. I think you'll probably see bearing failure and lots of damage to your rear end if you go that route. I got the rear end finished up. I put the wheels on and I torqued them down. So there's not much left to do back here. This third member, for now, I cleaned it up really well with a needle scaler, finished it, and prepped it. Painted it with 3 coats of just some Rust-Oleum gloss black to get me by. It should hold up for a while, but I do plan to do the encapsulator and black ceramic paint later when I rebuild that. This new e-locker came in for the truck, so I'm going to get this put in. I just went through and read the directions. They want you to have it fully locked, so this fork is all the way engaged. That last tooth should be about lined up with the top of the hole here. So this thing comes in a locked position, so you got to have your button pushed and engaged, and then you should be able to slide this thing in like that. I was going down the list of things I need to finish up before the bed goes back on the truck, and I really need to make these hitch mount reinforcement brackets. They're going to be way easier to get to now while the bed is off. I'm just going to cut these out of this plate steel that I have and get those on now. These are the old ones. I don't really think it's as necessary that I have these anymore, since the original frame was just so weak back there. Even, new, which is why these are here, to kind of beef up where it mounts to the frame. But I'm going to add them just for peace of mind and get them in there. I converted this cardboard template into some trailer hitch reinforcement brackets. So you can see they're all finished now and powder coated this nice dark gray. I like that stuff. Now I got to move on to some electrical work under there. These are going to be the new taillight connectors. These are from Amphenol. I've used them a lot in other car projects in the past. They're cheap and easy to work with. They're also weatherproof, unlike the factory Tacoma ones that are all crusty back there. So I'll be cutting off those and splicing these in. What I'm also going to be doing is adding this trailer wiring package. It does have one from the factory and I have no problem with it, but I wanted to upgrade to a 7-pin and 4-pin setup like this Hopkins kit here. So like most modern vehicles have, I'll have both connections in one. This is part number 47180. It looked like a really nice heavy duty compact kit. I've already pre-wired it and everything's waterproof, heat shrinked and packed under this loom, ready to go. I'm going to run it right through the factory grommet and into the cab. I'll have all the provisions so I can add the trailer brake and everything else. So I'm going to do that next. I finished the trailer harness install and I hooked it up to my old camper just to test it out. See, everything's working just fine. It's plugged in here. You also notice my street legal package. The taillights are taped on for now until I get the bed on. And I've got this piece of wood across here through the bed mounts. Actually, it's a perfect location to mount the mud flap, so it's legal there. Down here you can see where it's mounted to the factory Toyota hitch mount. There's the connector. If you look in here real close, I thought this was interesting. 2002 and on, 6,000 pound rating. I believe this Tacoma specifically was rated for 5,000, like it says up above there. But that might have something to do with maybe a, I don't know if a 4-door or if a Tundra shares the same hitch setup, and it's rated higher. I'm not really sure. Just thought that was interesting. The harness here has a little bit extra loop of wire, so if I decide to change the bumper later, I can change the mounting location of that connector. Figured might as well show you those things too. Look at that. Those new brackets holding all this stuff together, looking real nice. This harness is nice and tidy, tie wrap down the frame all the way where it goes into the factory grommet. It's taped off there. We go around the inside and you can see the factory fuses right there, the fuse box, and then where I cut the original and splice this one in. So it's all taped up. The extra wires for the trailer brake and stuff are just taped out of the way until I get to that point. Now I can go back to just doing the taillights, and I think I'm done back there. I've been waiting a long time to get to this point, but this is it. This is the final walk around of the truck before the bed goes on. Just wanted to share the work and how everything turned out. If you've been watching from the beginning, thanks. Appreciate it. You'll also see just how it's transformed from then till now. It's amazing. Everything is done back here. The connectors that I finished last are right here. These are the Amphenol 6-pins. The original ones are these crappy ones here that are not weather pack sealed. You can see they're kind of crusty and stuff in there. That's why I changed them out. If anybody's curious on doing the same thing, I'd recommend it. I believe the Tundras of the same era were sealed. I don't know why they skimped on this one, but I also have to get new taillights at some point because they're cracked, a bumper, some other stuff, but it's drivable, and the bulk of this work is done. Spare tire, I did not do these brackets yet, because when I get new wheels and tires, I'm likely going to be modifying these for that package. So that's just on for now. I also had to put a muffler on this thing because the truck was a little loud driving around with this an open cat. So I dug the muffler out of the scrap pile. I ended up welding a straight piece of pipe to the flange and putting in a O2 sensor bung back in it so that that's all happy. Got a temporary mount. I don't want to Swiss cheese my new cross member just for a temporary solution, because I'm going to be doing a whole new setup with the diesel engine and exhaust back here. But this is it. This is how the truck turned out. Next time you see this truck, it's going to have the bed on it. And I'll probably get some footage of it driving around and a rundown of what's next.